Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Shadowtalk, and once more, I am Bull, your host, and this is my second episode. So last time we talked a little bit, I talked a little bit about how I got started with Shadowrun and what introduced me to the game and everything, and I kind of got a little mushy towards the end as I started thinking about how much Shadowrun's affected my life and everything. One of the big turning points for my life for Shadowrun, for me, was uh, my it was honestly my first year at Origins, which is my second year going to conventions. I'd had a lot of fun playing in the tournament the first year. As I said, we ended up losing the tournament because I was exhausted um, by the third night. The whole team was because we didn't really know what to do, what to expect from Gen Con, and we didn't pace ourselves well. We didn't sleep right. We didn't eat right. So after 3-4 days of just constant game overload, we pretty much all just collapsed. It was a lot of fun, and afterwards we went out to a bar. The ah, blanking on the name of the place, the Spy Bar up there in Milwaukee. Oh God, I can't believe I can't think of the name off right now. But Safe House, the Safe House. We went out to the Safe House for the final night. That was a lot of fun. But for Origins, as I mentioned, originally I had been asked by Mike Mulvihill at FASA to oversee the Shadowrun card game tournament because I was a big fan of the game and he knew that. And I'd gotten to know the rules really well and everything. So I had agreed to do that, but that was like a 1 day thing. It was like 4 or 6 hours. I don't even remember. It wasn't even all that long or that involved. Um, I think we got 16 or 20 players for it. It wasn't nearly as big an event as we'd hoped it was going to be. Um, but it was still a ton of fun to run, and the winners got a complete set of cards in a customized box with artwork from a couple of the Shadowrun artists, original artwork, hand drawn onto the box and everything. That was a really cool little prize for them. But the but what really got me was shortly before the convention, I got asked if I could help out the tournament, the RPG tournament team, because they were shorthanded. So I said sure. So I get there on Wednesday, and I meet up with the guys. And at the time, and that year, the tournament and everything was being overseen by a gentleman named Zach Bush. And was and is an awesome guy. Um, and it was an interesting experience because I get there and I start talking to him, and well, we find out that there's a couple of problems. One, none of the characters are done. Well, they were done, but they were done poorly, so they needed redone. Like, just as an example, it was like the characters had no background, no personalities written out for them. Um, their their skill and their skill list was kind of incomplete. But then, like, the characters would have these just giant equipment lists. Um, it was like this little tiny page of stats, and then like 2 pages of equipment that was like just completely unnecessary and complete overkill. I think the mage had like 30 or 40 grenades on him. It was unreal. But then there was other like necessary gear that was missing and stuff. So we ended up needing to kind of go back and redo the characters. Um, and then we looked at the tournament itself, and the tournament was incomplete at the time too. The writer was with us, the guy who designed the tournament. He was with us, and he hadn't been able to finish it in time before the convention. Round one wasn't bad, but round two was about half done, and round three wasn't written out at all. And this was a big problem because, as I said, the tournament was designed to be run as you started off with 12 teams, and it was an elimination tournament each round. And there was one round each day. So, and every team is supposed to be running the exact same set of characters and the exact same adventure. So it's kind of important that you have at least an outline of all the major details for that scene, for each scene. So that way, two tables running the same, so that way each table is getting the same experience for one, and two, so that they can be judged on that same experience. Not really fair to judge somebody like, somebody goes to this bar and they have a really tough time, um, and get marked down for it, but then like another team completely didn't go to that bar. Not because of anything they did, but because the GM didn't run it, because it wasn't on their list or whatever. So it was always important to have everything as detailed as possible. So I remember we were Wednesday night. We also didn't have our main hotel. For whatever reason, FASA, it was, I think the convention center screwed up FASA's reservations. So FASA only had their reservations from Thursday night to Saturday night. Um, and the convention started on Thursday. Origins now actually starts on Wednesday, but at the time, Origins started Thursday morning. But generally speaking, everybody got in um, Wednesday. At least we all did on Wednesday, so that we could, kind of figure out what we're doing. If the FASA guys would go down and set up their, would get their booth and everything set up, and it would give us a chance to kind of just chill and relax before everything started and went crazy. Because, for depending on exactly what you're doing, 8 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock in the morning, Thursday morning, games are starting and everything kicks off, and it's just off to the races, and you don't stop again until Sunday. So Wednesday's your night to kind of collect yourself and charge. But like I said, weren't able to get our rooms down by the convention center. So we ended up staying outside of town a little ways that night. And because the tournament wasn't written, we actually sat there taking turns on one of the guys' laptops writing. And literally, I think four of us took turns writing stuff and stayed up most of the night. I think I might have grabbed an hour or two here or there. It wasn't even like 2 hours of like me laying down for 2 hours. I think I like fell asleep for half an hour here and an hour there and maybe another half an hour. And then got to the convention center and sat there for even more time trying to get everything done. It was a complete crazy experience. Uh, so Thursday at the convention, I'm exhausted. Um, but I'm glad to say I had a fantastic time. My first round team was amazing. I had a really good group, and in fact, those guys actually ended up going on to win the tournament, and they ended up going on to win a couple of more tournaments the years after that, and then I started roping them into GMing because they weren't allowed to win tournaments anymore. um, but they were a great group of guys, and I'm really good friends with a few of them still, and miss some of them. Um, but don't get to see them nearly often enough. But it was a fantastic experience. Um, and GMing at a tournament is really an interesting experience overall, and I think that's what I really was going to talk about tonight today with this episode of Shadow Talk was GMing and tournaments and stuff when you're trying to do this, because it's something I don't think a lot of people really understand how that works. Um, it's like I said, it's tough because you want to present a full experience. You want to let the runners run crazy, and you want to let them have as much fun as possible, because as a GM, that's kind of your job. But at the same time, like I said, it is a competition. They are given characters that have somewhat detailed backgrounds and personalities, and that is to challenge the characters to role play the character that they're given. They get some chance to choose at the table. The characters are laid out, and the players are allowed to look through them and pick which ones they want to play. So they're not forced to necessarily play something they're going to be completely uncomfortable with. Usually. Of course, unfortunately, sometimes somebody does get stuck with something they're not going to really enjoy. It's just kind of how it happens. Um, but we want to challenge the players, and we want to test the players to see how well they can react to a character that they didn't design. Um, because it's fairly easy to role play a character that you came up with yourself, especially if it's one you've had time to that you came up with before the convention, that you had time to sit and figure out what you wanted to do with. But it's a lot harder to um, do that with a character you're just handed out of nowhere. So, um, and then there's the adventure. Like I said, there's the adventure itself. The interesting thing with the adventures is that each night needs to be complete. Especially back then. It's a little less important now. We can kind of do more cliffhangery stuff. Um, but back then, because of the elimination style of the tournament, sometimes the end of the round was also the last the players got to play. So you didn't, if you could help it, you didn't want to, basically just end it in the middle of something or end it on a cliffhanger or whatever. Although we did that sometimes. Usually night 2 would do that, because then you're only looking at a 4-2, and it's not as bad to do. Plus, it ramps up the tension for that final round. But going from 1-2 was a little less. We didn't do that as often, because like I said, you didn't want to. You didn't want to have 8 player or 8 entire groups, which is 8 players, 8 groups, 6 players each. That's 48 players. You don't want to have them show up, sit down for a night, and play 1/3 of an adventure and feel like it was only 1/3. So you always wanted to try to have some sort of wrap up point, so they can kind of walk away at least a little bit satisfied that they had a complete game, even if they didn't get the complete story. And you needed to make sure that the nice thing about the tournaments was, because you knew the characters ahead of time, um, you could tailor the adventure. Um, I've done a lot of work on missions, and where in missions is one of those bring your own character type of deals. So you never know what you're going to get at the table. So you always kind of have to write adventures as broadly as possible, so that way, if no deckers show up, they're not going to be completely hosed if there's by having a piece of information that only a decker can obtain, or something along those lines. You can't, if they, this requires negotiation, but I got a table of 8, or got a table of 6 trolls with all of them with uncouth. Not going to work. So it was important. So it's important for missions to be broad, but for the tournaments was great, because you could really tailor it down to the characters and to the personality and backgrounds you've written even. So that was always fun too, because you could write in, Bob's long lost cousin shows up out of nowhere to harass the players, and the player has written in his background, his history with Bob. So when that popped up, you could just go right into it. Like, in theory, some players didn't react as well, and some people did. And you always had those players that just didn't actually bother to read any of their background. And that was always exciting. So it was always a little bit of a shame to do the eliminations, though, in those early years, because one thing we did find was that there was usually 1 or 2 groups that would want to come and play, or would want to come and watch. Even if they couldn't play the tournament, they wanted to watch, like, especially the guys that got to the 4th round. Or 4th round. Especially the guys that got to the 2nd round, the 4 teams. Often at least one of the 2 teams that got eliminated would want to come and check out the 3rd round. A, because they'd kind of allotted that time slot off anyways. And B, because they wanted to see how the adventure wrapped up overall. But at the same time, it also kind of sucked for players not to be able to get the full experience. So after a couple of years, we stopped doing the eliminations and started making them all 3 rounds. That made life a little easier, although also a little more complicated on the final days when we wanted to announce the winners and stuff, because we had a lot more numbers and a lot more things to look at for the finals. But it was an interesting experience doing all that. We had some great adventures, some not so great adventures. There was one adventure that the Gen Con team before me had done, and it was an interesting concept. It was this like mystery thing. It was kind of tied. It was loosely tied into. It was supposed to be tied into Year of the Comet the year before Year of the Comet came out, or before. But it was also before FASA closed. Um, so Year of the Comet had been announced, but it hadn't come out yet and everything, and it took a couple more years. But anyways, the tournament involved it was like in the mountain in the mountains of West Virginia. Somebody found a new orichalcum, or a naturally occurring orichalcum vein, or something along those lines. I don't remember all the details because it's been a long time, and I've done a lot of Shadowrun adventures over the years. And like I said, I didn't write this one or anything, and I only ran the first round of it, I believe. And unfortunately, the first round was kind of a letdown, especially because this was still elimination at the time. Because first round was just the runners traveling to the foothills of West Virginia. They had to drive there and investigating around town a little bit. Um, and unfortunately, there was no combat, almost no combat. There was one combat at the very tail end of the scene. It was the last thing the runners did before we ended for the night. Um, and outside of talking to people, the only other like obstacle in the entire round was a fallen tree in the road. And then their final thing they had to do was they had to fight. They actually go out into the hills and they start poking around. There was rumors of something strange in the hills, so they go to check it out, and it's a Force 1 Earth Elemental, which was just laughable, especially because the characters that they had were not starting level characters. These were characters that had some really good gear and some stats and stuff behind them. Um, this was one of those things where the players could have sneezed and killed it. And just to give you an example, I bumped it to a Force 6 and they one-shotted it. Another table I know made it a Force 6 a greater Force 6, and they still killed it before it got an action. I think it took them 2 or 3 characters going, but they still just aced it before it ever got a chance to even, do anything. So it was just one of those things where I was just kind of like, wow, this had to be really disappointing for the players. I think second and third rounds were better from what I heard, but and there was a lot of important information and stuff that the players had to gather during round one. So I mean, it wasn't like it was a complete loss and there was nothing to do. But if you weren't a character and or a player that would really get in there and interact, you were left with nothing to do. And as a GM, I was really scrambling to try to keep the entire table engaged. So that's always something to be careful with. But we also had some just fantastic ones. There was one year we did this one where the players get one of the players gets injected by something or affected by some sort of virus, nanotech virus thingy. It was experimental, but it was also unstable, and he gets it right around the first night. Not a whole lot happens the first night. He doesn't really notice it too much. But there's not really a whole lot there. And so the rest of the adventure ends up being them trying to find a cure for it. And he would get progressively stronger and stronger. Stronger, faster, tougher. But it was killing him. And it was a lot of fun because it was our elf character. He was our elf face. And he was deliberately created kind of underpowered other than being a social character. So in the first round, he wasn't able to do a whole lot, although there was, negotiation and stuff for him to do. He wasn't able to do a ton with the combats and stuff because I think he really, he only had a little bit of a pistol skill, a little bit of unarmed combat or club skill, and not much in the way of physical attributes to back him up. And then second round he gets stronger and faster, and third round he gets really strong and really faster. And like I said, he was an elf, but we had done something kind of fun with the character backgrounds, and that 2 of the characters were brothers. The elf and the troll in the group were brothers. We just thought that would be kind of fun. Play around with the the racial and family dynamics a little bit. And the one group I was running second night, when they found out and this was actually the same, to some extent the same group that I mentioned I ran for the first year, that I had a lot of fun with. Because like I said, these guys are really good at just coming up with stuff off the cuff. And so they'd gotten in. So the elf is infected, and second night, they discover that he's getting tougher and stronger. And the troll like slaps him on the back and goes, "Brother!" He actually slapped up other player on the back and goes, "Brother, you're finally becoming one of us," or something along those lines. And it just had everybody at the table rolling hysterically. And so that had them freaking out for the rest of the night too, that he thought he was becoming a troll. And he was playing it up like he was, so he started playing up that his character was a little more, really liked his appearance and liked being a pretty boy, and he didn't want to turn into a troll. So he was desperate for the cure for that reason. That was a lot of fun. We did another tournament where we actually crossed over Gen Con and Origins. This was a year when I had actually started doing both conventions. And we decided to do this adventure based on the Maltese Falcon. Based on the Maltese Falcon. It was also tied into Year of the Comet a little bit as well. It was post Year of the Comet, though. So the idea was that the Smithsonian was doing an exhibit on classic movies or something along those lines. And the Maltese Falcon had been given away in Dunkelzahn's will. So we had the owner of the Falcon had donated it to the Smithsonian temporarily to be used as part of this exhibit. And so the players on night one were hired to break into the Smithsonian and steal the Falcon. And meanwhile, they're being hunted down by the Knights Templar, who actually have like this tie to the Isle of Malta and what is believed to be the original origin of the Maltese Falcon prior to Dashiell Hammett's novel and the movie and stuff. So the Knights Templar are involved, and there was another group. I don't remember who off the top of my head. So basically, there's this three-way fight going on while the runners try to steal and hold on to the Falcon and get it to their Mr. Johnson. And then second round of the Gen Con tournament, the second part of the adventure, took place at Gen Con, with the players playing FBI agents, starting off in Washington, D.C., investigating the theft of the Falcon, and then tracking it to Denver, where it had been delivered. And in Denver, the courier had gotten jumped, so it shuffled hands some more, and the Templars were still involved, and there was still another group. And it all turned out that it was Ghostwalker who was interested in the Falcon for various reasons. So it was kind of fun. And unfortunately, I think we only had one or two players that had been at both conventions. So that didn't go off nearly as well as I'd hoped. I mean, you experiment with ideas and stuff. And sadly, this was before we did things, and like I would have loved to have written those adventures out. I don't even have the adventures anymore. They're lost to an email group and a hard drive crash. An email group that no longer exists because, God, it was I don't even remember what we were using at the time. There was some sort of online email group, kind of like a Gmail concept, but specifically for doing email groups, and you could store files and stuff on there. And that was what we originally used, or that was what we used for a number of years. And unfortunately, the hard drive that all that stuff on blew up on me years and years ago, so I don't still have that. We had one adventure where we were at the end of the first round, we were actually going to swap out a character. Second round takes place like 6 months later. So at the end of first round, we wanted to. This was one of the times we wanted to actually do a kind of a cliffhanger. But this was also when we started doing, after we started doing the full tournament where we didn't have any elimination. So it didn't matter so much if we did something like this. And the idea was that there was this big firefight at the end of the first round of the tournament, and one of the players, and the GM was basically instructed to kill a specific character during this firefight. There was a sniper that was supposed to take care of it because the sniper was, the sniper basically had been designed to kill the player no matter what the player did. Except kill the character, not the player. Kill the characters, you don't kill the players. That would be bad and illegal. But one of the players that had that character just was, for whatever reason, ultra paranoid, and there was and refused to get out of the van that they were in. And then, like, every time the GM came up with something to deal with that, the player would counter. And if I didn't know any better, I would say the player knew what was going on, but they didn't. They had no idea. But it was just really funny that, like, every time the GM tried to maneuver the player, he couldn't. So he just, no matter what he tried, he could not kill this player, could not kill the player, could not kill the player. So finally, he just ended the adventure. He's like, all right. He wrapped everything up. They finished everything they needed to do. Defeated all the enemies, etc., etc. And then he goes, as a parting shot, he's like, oh, and as you're walking home, you're hit by a bus. The end. Come back tomorrow. Because we really wanted to, have the character killed. And we wanted to have the players kind of have that moment of, holy crap, not know what to do. And then we'd be like, no, sorry, we can't, you're dead. Well, what's going to happen? Well, come back tomorrow and we'll see what we can do. And the idea was there was a changeling Miss Johnson. This was, we were playing with the Year of the Comet changeling rules this year. And the idea was there was a changeling who was the Miss Johnson for that game. Or she was the target. No, yeah, she was the target. She was supposed to get rescued by the players. She was the daughter of somebody who was rich, I believe, and she had run away from home or something along those lines, or gotten kidnapped or something. Either way, we were playing up the idea that, the changelings were weird. Surge was weird and strange, and nobody understood it, and everybody hated it and everything. And she had run away from home because she was, suddenly a surge. So, and so we ended the first round with her being rescued or whatever. And then second round, she was actually going to, it would be 6 months later, and she would actually join the team because she couldn't go back home again or something like that, so she decided to become a Shadowrunner. And so the player who had lost the previous character was going to take over this character. So, like I said, it was interesting. And that was a tough one. We had to throw a little, we had to get a little tricky, and then just like I said, the one runner just going all out and going, okay, you're hit by a bus. Thank you. Good night. We laugh about that one to this day. I miss doing the tournaments a little bit. They were a lot of fun, and we did some crazy shit. But yeah. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and call this recording. Thank you for playing. Or thank you for playing. Thank you for listening, really, because all you're watching here on the screen is me apparently playing, playing Shadowrun Hong Kong. This was one of the Let's Play videos I did, and I just was like running it in the background because I still don't have my camera working and stuff. So, anyways, laptop is still kind of borked. But yeah, so that's a little something. Figured share a few tales there. Next time.